I never expected a transfer student in senior year of high school. Even less did I expect that from that day on. My childhood sweetheart of 12 years would keep turning toward him. They discussed problems together. They left school together. They even went to our secret hideout together. On the day the Gaokao, China's national college entrance exam ended, I understood the look in her eyes. And so my 12-year secret love ended quietly without ever coming to anything. We didn't apply to hiking university the way we had promised. She went to Qiaoheng with someone else, and I headed north, to a faraway place without her. From that day on, we were no longer going the same way. The night before the final semester of senior year began, I went again to the abandoned old station. I hadn't actually arranged to meet by Ningbing. It was just that after dinner, I stood on the balcony memorizing English vocabulary. By the third round, I suddenly heard a train whistle in the distance. Our small city no longer ran those old green-painted slow trains. The new high-speed rail station had been built in the south. It blazed with lights, like a whole new world. But on certain nights, I would still think of the old station on the northern edge of town. So I closed my vocabulary book, told my mom I was going downstairs to buy pen refills, grabbed my jacket, and went out. The old station wasn't far from my house. It was a 15-minute bike ride. The night wind swept through the narrow lanes of the old district. Flyers on the utility poles rattled in the gust. By the time I parked my bike at the station entrance, the sky had gone completely dark. The place had been abandoned for years. The paint had peeled from the station sign. The waiting hall's glass was shattered in several places. A yellowed old notice was pasted on the ticket window. It listed the relocation date. Its curled corners trembled lightly in the wind. The faded route map on the wall was still there. Only many of the place names had blurred beyond recognition. 2 adults. This place was a ruin. To buy Ningbing and me. It was our secret hideout. When we were little, we hid comics in the old storage room behind the waiting hall. We stuffed unfinished summer homework into an iron cabinet. And under the camphor tree at the end of the platform, we once buried an iron box. Inside were the postcards. We had written them the year we graduated middle school. To ourselves after we turned 18. I had just stepped into the waiting hall when I saw a faint light by the old storage room door. Someone was using a phone as a flashlight, crouched on the floor, rummaging through things. My steps paused. Hearing me, that person turned around. The phone light shone up from below her face, making her eyes look especially bright. Ningbing froze for a moment, then smiled. "What are you doing here?" I shoved my hands into my jacket pockets, pretending to be calm. "I came out to buy pen refills. This was on the way." She lowered her head and glanced at me, at my empty hands. "Where are the refills?" I fell silent for 2 seconds. She laughed even harder. Her eyes curved, like leaves stirred by wind on a summer evening. "You're terrible at lying." "Ha!" I didn't argue. I walked over and crouched beside her. The storage room was a little damp. In the corner were still things we had left there as children. Half a comic book with pages falling out, a deflated red rubber ball, and a rusted biscuit tin. Ningbing brushed off the dust. Then she suddenly said, "Do you remember? The first time we met was right here." Of course I remembered. That day, I had hidden in the storage room and cried. I could no longer clearly remember why. Maybe I had done badly on a test. Maybe my classmates had laughed at me. Or maybe I was just a child, suddenly feeling wrong one day, as if the whole world wanted nothing to do with me. I sat in the corner hugging my knees, crying in a humiliating mess. Then Ningbing appeared. That day, her hair was tied into 2 loose little braids. In her hand was a blueberry-flavored ice pop. The plastic wrapper was covered in melted droplets. She didn't ask why I was crying, nor did she tell me not to cry like adults always did. She simply crouched down and very seriously snapped the ice pop in half. Then she handed me 1 half. She said, "Here, half for you. Eat something cold and you won't cry anymore." When I took it, my hand was wet and smelled of blueberry. The taste was faint and the cold made my teeth ache. But I really did stop crying. After all these years, I have forgotten many things. I forgot why I was sad that day. I forgot what color dress she wore. I even forgot how we started counting the years after that. But I have always remembered that half ice pop. It was very cheap, only 50 cents each outside the convenience store. But that was the first time I felt that someone was willing to share half of her summer with me. Ningbing closed the biscuit tin again, patted off her hands, and stood up. "Let's go see if our time capsule is still there." As soon as she said it, she ran toward the platform. I followed behind her. I didn't remind her to slow down, because when she ran, her ponytail swayed lightly. The wind lifted her school uniform jacket, and she looked as if she were racing toward somewhere far away. The camphor tree at the end of the platform was still there. Its trunk was much thicker than when we were little. Its leaves rustled darkly in the night. We crouched beneath the tree. With a broken brick we had picked up, we dug for a long while. At last, we dug out the iron box. The iron box had already rusted. The edges were a little stuck. I pried it open with my key. Inside lay the laminated postcards. Ningbing picked up her postcard first. The light from her phone fell on the yellowed paper. Back then, her handwriting was round. Stroke by stroke. Childish yet earnest. I want to go to Hideout with Fang Yuan, because the sea is vast, and summer is long. After she read it, the tips of her ears flushed faintly. Why was I so naive when I was little? I lowered my head and smiled. Before I could answer, she picked up mine and was about to read it. I reached out to snatch it back, but she reacted faster than I did. She turned and dodged away, raising the postcard as she read aloud. Wherever she goes, I'll go too. The air suddenly went quiet for a moment. In a nearby apartment building, someone closed a window, making a soft sound. Ningbing held that postcard and slowly turned back to look at me. Fang Yuan. Her voice was very soft. Who was the girl you wrote about back then? I looked at her. The night wind blew over. The camphor leaves rustled. She stood beneath the tree, her eyes bright, as if she really were only asking casually. I closed the iron box. Lowering my eyes, I made my tone as natural as I could. Who else could it be? She froze. I lifted my head to look at her. I couldn't help smiling a little. Back when we graduated elementary school. Besides you, who else kept forcing me to come here every day to hide comics? Ningbing seemed to breathe a sigh of relief, and also seemed a little embarrassed. She lifted her foot and nudged the dirt on the ground. Then it settled. After the Gaokao, we'll go to Hideout to see the sea. I watched her bury the iron box again. Moonlight fell on her shoulders, a thin, pale layer. At that moment, I truly thought we would go to Hideout together. I thought that after the Gaokao, the sea breeze would blow across the summer we shared. I nodded okay. Ningbing smiled. She held out her little finger for a pinky promise. I looked at that childish gesture of hers, and still reached out my hand. Her little finger hooked around mine, and she gave it a gentle shake. The abandoned old station was very quiet. There was only the night wind, the camphor tree, and the dream we buried on the eve of turning 18, before it had even had time to fade. I had always thought that at this point in senior year of high school, no new students would come to our class. But on the first day of school, our homeroom teacher still brought in a transfer student. His name was GDA. It was a pleasant name, and he looked exactly like the kind of boy who would appear in a coming-of-age film. He was tall, with straight shoulders and back. He wore a clean white jacket. Standing at the podium, he introduced himself without the slightest hurry. His voice was clear and cool. He said he had transferred back from another city, so he could be closer to home while preparing for exams. A girl in class whispered that he was so handsome. Someone else said, I heard his grades are excellent. He used to attend a provincial key high school. I sat by the window, head lowered as I spun my pen, not paying much attention. In senior year, whether someone was handsome or not mattered less than the last two big questions on an exam paper. The homeroom teacher looked around the room and finally seated GDA diagonally behind my Ningbing. Ningbing turned back to glance at him and gave him a polite smile. GDA smiled back. It was a very natural smile, not forced, not overly warm, yet just enough to make him seem easy to approach. The tip of my pen paused on the scratch paper for a moment. Soon, I went back to solving the problem. The second class that morning was math. The teacher explained a final, difficult conic section problem. Most of the class listened in a fog. As soon as the bell rang, the classroom filled with groans. At her desk, Ningbing pushed her paper forward. Fang Yuan. I didn't understand this one. I was just about to turn around and explain it to her, when a voice suddenly came from behind. Are you stuck on the second part? My movement stopped. GDA leaned slightly over from behind her at an angle. He held a black pen in his hand, his tone very gentle. Ningbing froze for a second. Yes, I can't figure out the parameter range in the second part. You don't have to brute force it here. GDA turned the scratch paper toward her. First, treat this point's trajectory as a whole, then substitute it back in. It becomes much simpler. He explained it very clearly. It wasn't the kind of explanation meant to show off. Instead, he knew how to guide the person listening. At first, Ningbing was still frowning, but as she listened, her eyes slowly lit up. So that's how it works. She smiled, took the pen, and wrote a few lines on the paper. Then she turned back to GDA. You explain problems so clearly. GDA smiled. I used to explain things to my desk mate all the time. I got used to it. I sat beside her, twirled the pen once in my hand, and let it land against my knuckles. Actually, I knew how to solve that problem too. I could even have explained it in more detail. I knew exactly which step by Ningbing was most likely to get stuck on. I knew that when she saw complicated parameters, she would instinctively want to skip ahead. I knew she didn't like listening to long derivations. You had to break the idea apart first, then lead her through it bit by bit. I knew all of that. But that day, she didn't turn back to ask me again. Over the next few days, GDA quickly blended into the class. His grades were good, and he wasn't cold to people. When teachers called on him in class, he had the answers. When classmates had questions, he was willing to explain. Most importantly, he wasn't like those of us who had been in the same class since 10th grade. We all knew each other inside out. He was like a gust of wind, blowing into a classroom already piled high with exam papers and old books. By Ningbing began turning back often to ask him questions. At first, it was only math. Then it was physics. Later, even for a phrase in an English essay, she would turn around and ask, GDA, does this sound more natural? GDA would usually put down his pen and explain it to her patiently. After Bai Ningbing listened, she would nod and smile. She would say, how do you know everything? I sat beside her. Sometimes, I would hear them. I never cut in, nor did I show any displeasure. After all, she was only asking questions. In senior year, you asked whoever could explain things clearly. It was normal. That was what I told myself. Until school ended that day. The last evening self-study session was over. The classroom filled with the sound of chairs scraping. As usual, I packed my school bag and casually handed Bai Ningbing the water cup she had left on the corner of her desk. Let's go. I had said those words for many years, from elementary school to middle school, and from middle school to high school. Our homes were not exactly on the same route, but we would walk part of the way together. I would walk her to the alley entrance, then turn back toward the old city. Bai Ningbing took the cup, but did not put on her school bag right away. She glanced at me. There was a little apology in her eyes, and also a lightness I could not quite describe. Fang Yuan, you go home first today. The movement of my hands stopped. The movement of my hands stopped. What's up? GDA said. The bookstore by the school back gate just got a new set of final review materials. There are several practice sets inside, and they're pretty good. She zipped up her school bag, speaking a little faster than usual. I want to go take a look with him, and maybe buy a couple. After she said it, as if afraid I might misunderstand, she added, it's just some review materials. It'll be quick. I looked behind her. GDA was standing by the classroom's back door, waiting for her. His bag hung from one shoulder. He was looking down at his phone. Sensing my gaze, he looked up and nodded at me. Very politely. I nodded back. Then I said to Bai Ningbing, go ahead, then. Bai Ningbing seemed not to expect me to agree so quickly. She paused. Be careful on your way home. You too? She carried her school bag and ran toward the back door. Her ponytail swayed behind her shoulders. GDA casually held the door for her. Only after she went out did he follow her away. The classroom gradually emptied. I stood beside my seat, lowered my head, and took out the scratch paper she had just forgotten in her desk cubby. I placed it into her drawer. On the paper was an unfinished problem. Beside it was GDA's handwriting. Beautiful and neat. I walked out of the school gates alone. The early spring night was still a little cold. White steam rose from the roadside snack stalls. The sausage roller turned slowly. Before, Bai Ningbing would always say she was hungry on this road. Then I would buy a grilled sausage. She would take the first bite, then complain the rest was too greasy and shove it to me. Today, no one said they were hungry, so I did not buy one. When I reached the convenience store at the alley entrance, I stopped for a moment. The freezer glowed with white light. Inside, all kinds of ice cream and drinks were stacked neatly. On the bottom shelf, there were still blueberry-flavored ice pops. I pulled open the freezer door. Cold air rushed over the back of my hand. Only when I picked one up did I notice the price tag had changed. When we were kids, 1 yuan bought 2. Now it was 3 yuan each. People grow up. Even ice pops go up in price. I tore open the wrapper and snapped it in half down the middle. With a crack, the sound was sharp and clean. I held one half, but there was no one to give the other half to. In the end, I had to eat it myself. The blueberry flavor melted on my tongue. It was so cold my teeth ached. I frowned. Somehow, it was not as sweet as it had been when we were little. I walked home slowly. The streetlights stretched my shadow long across the road. Windows in the old city lit up one after another. Upstairs, someone was arguing. Someone else was yelling for a child to do homework. I lowered my head and bit into that half-ice pop. I thought, the manufacturer must have changed the recipe. Otherwise, how could it taste less sweet than before? By Ningbing, and GDA grew closer and closer. It was impossible to hide. A senior year classroom was too small. Besides, By Ningbing was already pretty, and GDA was the new transfer student. When they stood together, they were hard to ignore. At first, people only joked. By Ningbing is asking GDA questions again. Your math is improving so fast. Could it be the power of love? There was not much malice in those words. In the second semester of senior year, everyone was crushed by exam papers, rankings, and the countdown until they could barely breathe. On the blackboard at the back of the classroom, the numbers shrinking every day felt like a thin, taut wire. Everyone needed something light to laugh about. Every time, By Ningbing would explain with a red face, "Stop talking nonsense. I am just asking questions." GDA would only smile. He was good at handling jokes without making them awkward. The whole class would burst into laughter. During the long break, the weather finally cleared for once. By Ningbing was dragged out for a walk by her best friend, Yuan. The two girls walked along the outer lane of the track. Their steps were slow. Their school uniform jackets hung open. One of them held a bottle of yogurt. Yuan bumped By Ningbing's shoulder and smiled with pointed meaning. "Be honest. Is there something going on between you and GDA?" By Ningbing nearly choked on her yogurt. "What do you mean? Something going on? Do not talk nonsense like them." "How am I talking nonsense?" Yuan drew out her voice. "Lately, you ask him more questions than you ask Fang Yuan. And the way you look at GDA is obviously different." By Ningbing pressed her lips together. She did not deny it right away. The moment Yuan saw her reaction, she immediately perked up. "See, you hesitated. By Ningbing, you are done for. You have definitely fallen for him." By Ningbing lowered her head and looked at the plane tree leaves beside the track. In a small voice, she said, "I do not know either." She truly did not know. There was something about GDA that felt different from the small town. He would talk about evening self-study at schools and other places, about Sushi's plane tree roads, about when they used to join competitions, and the university campuses they had visited. When he spoke, he was never hurried. It was as if the world were vast, and he had already seen a little of it ahead of time. By Ningbing's life before had been too steady. Home, school, the abandoned old station, and Fang Yuan. Of course Fang Yuan was good to her, so good that she had grown used to it. He was always there. But GDA was different. He was like a wind that had suddenly blown in, making her feel for the first time that beyond senior year, beyond the life she knew, there were many faraway places she had never seen. Yuan sighed. Then she suddenly asked, "What about Fang Yuan?" By Ningbing was silent for a few seconds. The wind lifted the loose hair across her forehead. She squeezed the yogurt bottle until it bent slightly. After a while, she said softly, "Fang Yuan is different." "Different how?" By Ningbing thought for a moment, as if searching for the most accurate answer, and also the safest one. "I only see him as an older brother." When those words fell, I happened to be passing the entrance to the sports field. I stopped for a moment. The corners of the exam papers in my arms dug into me. My wrist hurt a little. Yuan seemed to say something else. By Ningbing answered her too, but the bell for class drowned out the rest. I lowered my head and glanced at the top exam paper. The page fluttered gently in the wind. Calling him an older brother wasn't really a bad thing. It was safe and clean. It would not cross any lines. I just suddenly remembered the postcard under the camphor tree at the abandoned old station, and the line I had written, "Wherever she goes, I will go too." It turned out that some words had only ever been taken seriously by me. That night, during the second period of evening self-study, By Ningbing had a stomachache. She lay across her desk. Her face was a little pale. Fine beads of sweat seeped across her forehead. I noticed almost immediately. Her stomach had never been good. If she ate too little in the afternoon, it would often hurt at night. Before, at times like this, I would go to the school convenience shop and buy her a bag of plain bread, then get her a cup of warm water. I glanced at her and asked quietly, "Stomachache?" By Ningbing raised her head. She forced a small smile. "A little." I stood up. "I will go buy something." Before she could say anything, I had already left the classroom with my campus card. The school convenience shop was behind the teaching building, during evening self-study. The path was very quiet. Only the office in the distance still had its lights on. I bought the plain bread she always ate, then went to the water dispenser and filled the cup with warm water. I held the cup in my hand. Its warmth slowly seeped into my palm. When I walked back to the classroom, my steps were a little faster than usual. But the moment I reached the back door, I stopped. Beside by Ningbing's seat, GDA was bending down slightly, handing her a box of stomach medicine and a cup of water. Take one tablet first, he said. This works fast. But do not leave your stomach empty too long. I will go buy something to eat with you later. Bai Ningbing took the medicine. Her voice was very soft. Thank you. GDA smiled. Why be so polite with me? The classroom light fell over them. One lowered his head to offer the medicine. The other lifted her eyes and took it. Their movements were so natural, as if rehearsed many times. I stood at the back door. The warm water in my hand slowly cooled. After a few seconds, I put the cup on the corridor windowsill. Then I turned and went back to my seat. The bag of bread was still in my hand. I did not give it to her. Bai Ningbing looked up and saw me. She seemed about to say something, but GDA had already put the medicine box away and quietly asked if it still hurt. I lowered my eyes and stuffed the bread into the deepest part of my bag. Evening self-study continued. The countdown on the blackboard had only 90-some days left. The teacher wrote problems at the podium. Chalk tapped against the blackboard, stroke after stroke. The sound crisp and clear. I lowered my head and worked on the exam paper. I pressed the pen tip down hard. A faint mark was scored into the paper. After I got home, I opened my bag to look for my keys. Only then did I find that bag of bread still buried at the very bottom. It had been crushed under textbooks and workbooks all evening. The wrapper was wrinkled beyond recognition. The bread inside had gone flat long ago. That afternoon, after the monthly exam ended, our homeroom teacher, for once, did not keep us late. Bai Ningbing let out a long breath. She turned around and said to GDA, "It is finally over." GDA smiled. "You guys have monthly exams all the time here. Senior year, right?" Bai Ningbing folded the scratch paper on her desk, her tone a little lighter. "It would be strange if we did not." GDA looked at her and suddenly asked, "So, where do you usually go when the pressure gets bad?" Bai Ningbing froze for a moment too. She looked back at me. It was a brief glance, almost instinctive, yet also as if she were confirming something. Before, if someone had asked that question, she probably would have blurted out, "We have a secret hideout." But this time, she did not say it right away. GDA noticed her hesitation and added with a smile, "If it is private, you do not have to say." Instead, those words seemed to give Bai Ningbing a little push. She immediately shook her head. "It is not private." She paused, a trace of excitement entering her voice. "There is an abandoned old station in the north of town. We used to go there all the time as kids. Hardly anyone goes there now. The platform is still there. It is a good place to clear your head." An abandoned old station. GDA raised his eyebrows. "That sounds interesting." Bai Ningbing smiled. "Right? I think so too." After saying that, she looked at me again. Her eyes bright. She looked at me and said, "Fang Yuan, shall we go later?" I raised my head. Her face still carried the looseness that came after the monthly exam ended, as if she had finally escaped a dense forest of problems and wanted to feel a wind that did not belong to the classroom. I meant to say no, but when the words reached my mouth, they still came out as After school, the three of us walked out of the gate together. It was the first time I had gone to the abandoned old station with Bai Ningbing, with someone else beside us. GDA pushed his bike and walked beside Bai Ningbing, listening as she explained the route, talked about the little street there that once sold sweet drinks, and how after the old station was relocated, the small town seemed to have had a piece of its memory cut away. When she said these things, her tone was so familiar, as if she were introducing someone to a very important place. I walked half a step behind them, my hands in the pockets of my school uniform, head lowered, watching the plane tree leaves stirring by the road. We had walked this road many times before. Bai Ningbing always walked on my left, because she said the right side was closer to the road, with too many vehicles, and she was scared. After that, I would automatically take the side nearest the road every time. But today, she walked beside GDA. GDA very naturally shielded her from an electric bike coming toward them. It was a small movement, but perfectly timed. Bai Ningbing looked up and smiled at him. "Thank you," GDA said. "Be careful." I watched their backs, and suddenly felt this road was much longer than before. When we reached the abandoned old station, the sky had not gone dark yet. The setting sun slanted across the broken glass of the waiting hall, reflecting a dim, golden light. The old notice was still posted at the ticket window, its edges curling, like a timetable that would never be taken down again. Ningbing ran in first, then turned back and waved. "Hurry up." GDA followed her in. Standing in the middle of the waiting hall, he looked around, a trace of wonder in his eyes. "This place really is special." Ningbing looked as if someone had praised her treasure. She smiled with pure delight. "When we were kids, the adults never let us come here. But Fang Yuan and I thought this place was especially nice." When she said Fang Yuan and I, her tone was completely natural. But for some reason, hearing it only left a strange ache in me. GDA looked at me. "You have been coming here since you were little?" I nodded. "That is nice," he said. "Having a place no one else knows about." Ningbing corrected him at once. "Now you know too." After saying it, she laughed too. GDA laughed as well. "Then, does that mean I am allowed to join you?" Ningbing thought about it, and nodded very seriously. "I guess so." I stood beside them without saying a word. The old storage room behind the waiting hall was still there. Ningbing led GDA over, and showed him the rusty metal cabinet, then the crooked little drawings we had made, in chalk in the corner when we were children. This one was drawn by Fang Yuan. She pointed at a blurred line on the wall, and laughed so hard she bent over. He said it was a train, but I always thought it looked like a caterpillar. GDA leaned closer to look, and laughed too. "It really does look a little like one." Ningbing laughed even harder. "See, I told you." Then she took GDA to the camphor tree at the end of the platform. The soil beneath the tree had been dug up last time, and the traces were no longer obvious. Ningbing crouched down, and pointed there. "This is where we buried our time capsule." GDA asked, "What did you write?" Ningbing did not answer right away. She looked back at me. In that instant, I was suddenly terrified she would say it aloud, afraid she would use that easy, casual tone to tell GDA, "I want to go to Haishi with Fang Yuan," as if they meant nothing. She smiled and said, "We were silly kids back then." GDA laughed with her, but she only lowered her head and stirred the fallen leaves on the ground. "It was nothing," she said. "Just some wish I scribbled when I was little." GDA did not ask further. He was smart, and knew exactly where to stop. The setting sun slowly sank lower. Wind blew over from the abandoned tracks, carrying the smell of rust and grass. Ningbing stood at the edge of the platform. She spread her arms and said, "Every time I come here, I feel as if I could go somewhere very far away." GDA stood beside her, and asked softly, "Where do you want to go?" Ningbing thought for a moment. "I used to want to go to Haishi." My heart stirred faintly. But the next second, she added, "But now, I think I want to go everywhere. Sushi seems nice too. I heard the schools there are beautiful, with lots of plane trees." GDA smiled. "Yeah, Sushi is a good place." They stood shoulder to shoulder, looking toward the far end of the tracks. At that moment, I suddenly understood with painful clarity that the old station had changed. The platform was clearly still there. The camphor tree was still there. The waiting hall, the ticket window, the faded route map, they were all still there. But this place was no longer just Ningbing's and my secret hideout. She had brought GDA inside. She showed him the storage room, showed him the camphor tree, showed him all the traces we had left behind as children. She introduced it all so naturally, as if she were sharing an old piece of time, and also as if she were taking me out of that old time. Little by little, they talked up ahead. I stood behind them, watching the three shadows stretch long across the ground by the setting sun. Ningbing's and GDA's shadows were very close together. My shadow fell on the other side, cut short by the edge of the platform. Suddenly, it all felt absurd. This was supposed to be our secret hideout, but, in that moment, I felt like an outsider. On the afternoon the Gaokao ended. At the final moment, when the bell rang, the whole teaching building seemed to come alive. Some people screamed in the hallway. Some tore their scratch paper to pieces and threw it into the air. Some hugged their desk mates and cried. Others stood there in a daze, as if they still had not caught up. Those days hounded by the countdown were truly over. So 90-odd days could pass this quickly after all. When I walked out of the exam room, the sunlight was dazzling. The front of the teaching building was packed with people. Parents held bouquets. Teachers stood in the crowd, calling students' names. The air was full of summer heat and sweat, and a light, restless thrill of finally being free. I saw Ningbing in the crowd. She wore a white short-sleeved shirt. Her hair was tied in a high ponytail. A few loose strands at her forehead were damp with sweat. She stood under the shade of a tree, looking down at her phone. The corners of her mouth were slightly lifted. I stood there for a while. Then I lowered my head and took that old postcard from the inner pocket of my school bag. The laminated corners had already yellowed a little. On it were still the words I had written, stroke by stroke, the year we graduated from middle school. Wherever she goes, I'll go to. I had wondered so many times whether to say those words aloud. I had heard her say she only saw me as an older brother. I also knew she had brought GDA into the old station. And I knew even more clearly that once someone else took certain places, it was hard for anything to go back to how it was. But I still wanted to give myself an answer. I did not want to make things hard for her. It was just that 12 years was too long. It began with that half of a blueberry-flavored ice pop. It began in the storage room at the old station. It began when she said eating something cold would stop the tears. I had liked her for too long. So long that this love no longer felt like a crush. It felt more like something in my youth. A quiet river. It had always flowed there. Silent, never asking for anything. But longing needed somewhere to go. I wanted to tell her by Ningbing. Whether you go to sushi or haishi, I can go with you. Those words had never changed. They were not some joke I casually wrote in middle school. They were not a childish, ignorant impulse either. They were the answer I still wanted to give. After thinking it through, seriously again and again, I slipped the postcard back into my pocket and walked toward her. Liu Ryan suddenly ran over from the side and grabbed Bai Ningbing's hand, saying something excitedly. After Bai Ningbing heard her out, she ran with her toward the teaching building. I stopped in my tracks. After a moment, I slowly followed. The classroom was much messier than usual. Books were piled on the desks. Chairs sat crooked and askew. The Gaokao countdown on the blackboard was still stuck at 0. That was the place where we had sat for 3 years. It was also the place where I once thought I would finally say those words aloud. But as soon as I reached the back door, I saw Bai Ningbing and GDA standing in the middle of the classroom. I did not know who started teasing them first. The few classmates still there gathered around, laughing and slapping the desks. GDA was holding a pen, as if he had just written something on her school uniform. Bai Ningbing lowered her head and glanced at it. Her face flushed deep red. She raised her hand to push him away. But the next second, GDA reached out and hugged her. Very gently, but with certainty. Bai Ningbing froze for a moment. Then she did not push him away. Her hand slowly came to rest on GDA's back. Another cheer burst through the classroom. Someone shouted, "Get together." Someone laughed and said, "The Gaokao is over. You finally do not have to hide it anymore, right?" I stood at the back door, as if I suddenly could not hear anything around me. Everything before my eyes slowed down. I lowered my head and looked at the place where my pocket was. That old postcard was pressed close to my chest, with only a thin layer of cloth between us. Yet it felt hard enough to hurt. Wherever she goes, I'll go too. That line seemed to have become a joke long ago. Not because I had not meant it, but because she already had someone she wanted to go far away with. I did not go in. I did not disturb them either. I only stood there for a while, then turned and left. The hallway was noisy. Downstairs, people were taking graduation photos. Some were crying. Some were shouting goodbye to the teachers. I walked through the crowd alone and left the school gate. No one noticed I had gone. That was normal enough. After all these years, I seemed to have always been good at standing beside him, without anyone seeing me as the main character of the story. I had walked the road to the old station many times. Today, it felt especially long. Summer in the small town heated up quickly. The plane trees along the road cast broad shadows. The freezer by the convenience store entrance still glowed white. When I passed it, I paused. The blueberry-flavored ice pops were still on the bottom shelf. 3 yuan each. I looked at them for a few seconds. I did not buy one. Too expensive. Because I suddenly understood that it was not the manufacturer changing the recipe. It was that ice pops like those were meant for the people. I crouched under the camphor tree and dug up that old iron box again. I placed the postcard back inside. The soil covered it little by little, as if it were burying some long summer with it. I stood up and dusted off my hands. Maybe, from the moment I heard myself say I only saw him as an older brother, I could have started saying goodbye. Only today, I finally admitted that my secret love had ended quietly without ever coming to anything. On the day we filled out our college application preferences, the WeChat chat window between Bai Ningbing and me was still stuck on the night before the Gaokao. She had sent me a message. "Good luck tomorrow." I replied, "You too. Hope we both do better than ever." 2 very short lines. Scroll up from there, and there was a physics multiple choice question she had asked me. Scroll up again. And there I was, reminding her to bring her exam admission ticket and transparent pencil pouch. Back then, messages went back and forth all the time. It felt like every day had endless little things to say. But after the Gaokao ended, the chat window suddenly went quiet. So it was possible to go this long without contacting each other. Before, if we went a single day without talking, it would feel as if something was wrong. By Ningbing would ask me, Fang Yuan, why are you ignoring me today? I would say I was working on practice papers. Then she would send over an angry cat sticker. Now she did not ask, and I did not explain. My mother specially took half a day off and sat beside me. She looked at the computer while wearing reading glasses and flipping through the admissions brochure. She did not really understand those major names either. She just felt this was a big decision and had to be there with me. My father sat at the other end of the dining table, a cup of strong tea by his hand. Every now and then, he would say, Jingxi is good. More opportunities. My mother glared at him. Do not boss him around. Let the child choose where he wants to go. I lowered my head and looked at the application preference system on the screen. The cursor stopped at the city section and did not move for a long time. My mother suddenly seemed to remember something and asked casually, You and Bai Ningbing grew up together. Did you two agree to go to the same university? The room fell quiet for a moment. I smiled. Mom, this is not a novel. Where would a plot like that come from? My mother looked at me. She probably still wanted to ask something, but in the end, she only closed the admissions brochure and set it gently on the table. She paused. Her voice softened. Go wherever you want to go. Do not choose for anyone else. And do not be afraid of being far from home. You have grown up this much, and you have always known your own mind. I murmured yes. In the end, I put Jingxi as my first choice. When I went to submit it, the system popped up a prompt asking, Are you sure you want to submit? I stared at that line for a few seconds and clicked confirm. At that moment, it felt as if something had finally landed. It was not exactly relief, but it was clear. That afternoon, I went to the old station. The summer sunlight was bright, bleaching the abandoned platform almost white. Wild grass grew thick beside the tracks. When the wind blew, the blades bent softly down, then slowly stood back up. I had just walked into the waiting hall when I saw Bai Ningbing sitting at the edge of the platform. She was wearing a pale-colored dress. Her hands braced behind her. She was tilting her head up, looking at the sky. The blue sky was high. The clouds were thin. She heard my footsteps, but did not turn around. She only drew out her voice and said, You finally came. Her tone was as familiar as before, like all those countless times when she had simply arrived a little earlier than me, as if nothing between us had changed. I paused, then walked over and sat down beside her, leaving a little distance between us. Bai Ningbing tilted her head to look at me. She seemed to be in a good mood. Her eyes were still bright. The wind lifted the loose strands by her ear. She reached up and tucked them behind her ear. She asked, Finish your application preferences. I said, Finished. Where did you apply? I looked at the dismantled tracks in the distance. Jingxi, Bai Ningbing nodded. She smiled a little. Not bad. Jingxi is pretty good. Lots of opportunities. I asked her, What about you? Going to Qiaoheng? Bai Ningbing did not hesitate. Yeah, I am going to sushi. When she said that, there was a trace of expectation in her eyes she could not hide. I nodded. That is great. Bai Ningbing smiled. I think so too. I am actually a little nervous, but mostly, I am looking forward to it. I have always stayed here before. Now I can finally go see another city. As she spoke, she looked up above the old station, at the faded route map. Isn't it strange? I used to feel this place could take us somewhere far away. But when it is finally time to leave, we are not leaving from here after all. I did not answer, because I suddenly remembered before school started, how she had hooked her pinky with mine under the camphor tree, and said we would go to Haishi together to see the sea after the Gaokao. She had said it so lightly back then. Neither of us brought it up again, nor did we mention those to postcards. Maybe she had forgotten. Maybe she had not. Maybe she just did not know how to say it, and I no longer had the courage to ask. After a silence, Bai Ningbing suddenly stood up. She patted the dust from the hem of her dress. Come on, walk me to the alley entrance. I looked up at her. She stood in the sunlight, looking down at me with a smile. The scene was too familiar, so familiar that I almost believed we were still the way we used to be. I stood up too. Okay. We left the old station together. The road from the north of town to the old district was one we had walked too many times. The convenience shop by the road was still there. Blueberry-flavored ice pop still sat in the freezer. The snack stall owner had changed to a new awning. The sausage roller turned slowly inside the glass case. When Ningbing passed by, she glanced toward the convenience shop. Have the ice pops gone up in price now? I said, yeah, 3 yuan each. Her eyes widened. That expensive? I lowered my head and smiled. Yeah, she seemed to remember something, and smiled too. But neither of us went in to buy one. Some things seemed meant to stay in childhood. When we reached that familiar alley entrance, Ningbing stopped. Every time before, I would walk her here. She would head inside, and then I would turn around and go home. Back then, I always felt we would see each other again the next morning, so every goodbye felt light. But today, she stood at the alley entrance and did not go in right away. The evening wind blew over, carrying the damp heat of summer. Ningbing looked at me. Zero. Her eyes curved slightly. Her voice was soft, like a joke, and also like a farewell. Starting today, we are not going the same way anymore. I looked at her. In that instant, I suddenly wanted to say, actually, I can take the long way around, just like I did for so many years before. Your house was never on my way home, but I could still walk you to the alley entrance. If you wanted to go to Haishi, I could go to Haishi with you. If you wanted to go to sushi, I had even thought before that if you asked, I could still change my application preferences. But in the end, I said nothing, because I knew she was not only talking about this stretch of road, not the road from school to the alley entrance, not the road from the old station to the old district. It meant that from 18 onward, she had the city she wanted to go to, and I had the direction I needed to take. She had the person she wanted beside her, and I should move forward to. We really were not going the same way anymore. I nodded. Ningbing seemed to let out a breath, yet also seemed a little disappointed. She raised her hand and waved at me. When you have seen the big world in Jingxi, do not forget your old classmate when you come back. I smiled. I won't. She turned and walked into the alley. After a few steps, she looked back at me again. Fang Yuan, what's wrong? She stood beneath the dim yellow street light. The evening wind made her voice sound faint. Make sure you enjoy college life. I looked at her and nodded. You too? Only then did she smile. She turned and ran into the alley. I watched her figure gradually disappear at the end of the winding lanes of the old district. Then I turned around too and walked back along another road. We truly were no longer headed the same way. College life was much slower than I had imagined. During senior year of high school, even catching my breath had felt like a luxury. But after I arrived in Jingxi, time suddenly loosened its grip. No one updated the countdown on the blackboard every day. No teacher stood at the podium saying, "This is the most important year of your life." In the morning, I could decide when to get up. At night, I could sit downstairs by the dorm for a while and watch the streetlights come on one by one. At first, I was actually not used to it. It always felt as if my backpack was missing a few sets of practice papers, and a piece of my heart felt hollow. I started running on the track on mornings without class, from 3 laps to 5, then to 10. By the end of each run, the wind would scrape past my ears, my chest would burn, and the messy thoughts in my head would be shaken loose a little. I also went to the library. Jingxi University's library was huge. The stairways were bright. Beyond the glass windows, rows of ginkgo trees were visible. In early autumn, the leaves had not yet turned fully yellow. When sunlight fell, the ground looked covered in a layer of pale golden light. My roommates were all pretty decent people. One was a guy from the north. He had a loud voice and cursed nonstop when gaming. But every time he ordered takeout, he asked if I wanted to go with him. One was from my hometown. His schedule was as regular as a clock. Every night at 11, he washed up right on time. The last one was local. He knew which little restaurants were cheap and good. On weekends, he often took us out for a proper meal. I also began eating and gaming with them, complaining about teachers taking attendance. Life seemed to be smooth flat again. It was not as intense and dramatic as I had imagined, but it did not stay frozen in place either. Only sometimes, I would still think of the small town and of Ningbing. Ningbing and I contacted each other less and less. When school had just started, she would still send me a few photos of sushi, the plane tree road, the lake on campus, the sunset outside her dorm balcony. She said sushi was really beautiful. I replied, yeah, it looks nice. Later, she posted more on WeChat moments and messaged me privately less. After that, when I wanted to know how she was doing, I relied almost entirely on her moments. She really did post often. Sometimes it was her eating with GDA in the cafeteria. Sometimes it was the two of them studying in the library. She would photograph his profile with the caption, "Having someone explain problems doubles your efficiency." Another time, she posted a night view of sushi. In the photo, GDA stood by a bridge, looking down at her, his gaze gentle. I saw that WeChat moment after finishing a run on the track. The honeymoon phase, I thought. Totally normal. I locked my phone, bent down, and kept stretching. Slowly, I learned not to open her photos. Slowly, I got used to seeing her standing with GDA, without leaving my finger on the screen for ages. Some things are just like that. At first, they feel like a thorn lodged in your throat. Later, the thorn is still there, but every breath no longer hurts. That day was also a very ordinary morning. I had run 8 laps, walked slowly along the edge of the track for a while, then stopped beside the horizontal bars to stretch my legs. When my campus card slipped out of my jacket pocket, I did not notice. That card had been with me for a long time. The card holder was transparent, with slightly worn edges. Inside was a small handmade paper insert. It had a pale blue background, and in the corner was a crooked little goldfish. By Ningbing had made it for me during sophomore year of high school. For a while, handmade card holders were popular in our class. The girls bought all kinds of stickers, colored pens, and sequins, decorating their campus cards until they were bright and flashy. By Ningbing bought a pile of supplies too. Full of excitement, she made herself a pink one, then casually shoved a blue one into my hands. Back then, she said, "Fang Yuan, you are way too boring. Even your campus card is black, white, and gray. It has no youthful energy at all." I said, "Why does a campus card need youthful energy?" She lowered her head and drew a goldfish on the paper. Then she said, "Perfectly justified. If I say it does, it does." Later, that pink card holder of hers was replaced after less than 2 months. She thought the peeling edges looked ugly, so she bought a new one. Only I kept using mine until now. The little goldfish had faded a little, and the transparent holder was no longer so clean. But I never replaced it. Sometimes people are strange. They clearly know some things no longer belong to the present, yet they still keep them close, as if by doing that, they can prove the past was not something they alone remember. "Junior," a clear female voice suddenly came from behind me. I turned around. A girl was running over from the other side of the track. She wore a loose white athletic t-shirt, her hair tied in a high ponytail. A fine sheen of sweat glistened on her forehead. Sunlight shone from behind her, making her whole figure almost dazzling. She ran up to me, breathing lightly, and handed over what she was holding. "Your campus card fell." I looked down and saw the familiar card in her palm. The pale blue card holder. The faded little goldfish. "Thanks," I took it from her. She did not leave right away. Instead, she glanced down at the card holder and smiled. "This card holder is pretty cute." My fingertips paused. Very few people noticed it. I put the campus card back into my pocket. My voice calm. "An ex-girlfriend made it." She asked it very naturally, with a faint smile in her eyes. I froze for a second, then shook my head no. She drew out the ending, as if she had understood something, yet chose not to ask any further. Then she held out her hand, open and relaxed. "My name is Zhuo. I am a junior in the School of Journalism. I saw you drop your card while we were running just now. I was going to call out to you, but you were running too fast." The name Zhuo suited her perfectly. Bright, warm, and full of undisguised life. I shook her hand. "Fang Yuan, I know. She waved the campus card she had just looked at, smiling frankly. "It is written right there." I could not help smiling too. Morning sunlight fell across the track. Everything was ordinary. So ordinary that I did not realize at the time this meeting would be fate making a quiet turn. Zhuo looked at me and suddenly asked, "Do you usually run at this hour?" "Yeah. I come when I do not have class." "Then we might run into each other a lot." She wound her earphone cord back around her wrist and waved at me. "I am off, Junior. If you drop your campus card again, I am charging you a delivery fee." She turned and ran back onto the track. Her ponytail swayed behind her, her steps light, like a flame dancing under the morning sun. I stood there and watched her run off. Only after a long while did I lower my head and touch the campus card in my pocket. The little goldfish was still there. It came from a small town long ago, from a summer far away, but the person who had just picked it up and returned it to me was the breeze on this morning track. Suddenly, I felt strangely light, as if something that had sunk deep in my heart for years had been touched by someone without meaning to. After that, I really did start seeing Zhuo often on the track. At first, they were only chance meetings. At 6:40 in the morning, the sky had just brightened. There were not many people on the field. When I reached my third lap, I would always see her appear from the curve on the other side. She had a beautiful running form. She was not especially fast, but her pace was steady. Her ponytail swung with each step, and she looked as if she had just awakened from the morning light. The first time we met there, she waved at me from half a track away. "Morning, Junior." I smiled and answered, "Morning, Senior." The second time, after her run, she stood beside the horizontal bars, stretching. When she saw me coming, she casually handed me an unopened bottle of mineral water. "For you." I took it. "Why?" "Because I stole your inside lane yesterday." My conscience finally kicked in. Zhuo was the kind of person who made it easy to relax. We started walking part of the way together after our runs. She would tell me things about the university, which elective was an easy class for credits, which teacher played documentaries every class, so you could pass by submitting one response paper at the end, which general course had an especially strict teacher who took attendance like a maniac, which cafeteria stall had beef noodles that looked thin and bland, but actually had incredible chili oil, which club had promo photos that looked like movie posters, but was all hard labor once you joined. When she talked about these things, her voice was vivid and alive. Most of the time, I listened, only answering now and then. But Zhuo never thought the silence was awkward. She said, "Fang Yuan, do you know what your greatest strength is?" I asked. "What?" "You do not talk much." I froze for a second. She laughed. "So many guys around me love showing off when they talk. They practically say the same thing 3 times, just to prove how impressive they are. You are different. When someone speaks, you really listen." I gripped the mineral water bottle. My fingertips tightened slightly. Hardly anyone had ever said that about me. I used to think being quiet was a flaw, because by Ningbing liked noise and bustle. She liked novelty. She liked someone telling her about the outside world. And what I could give her seemed forever limited to quiet companionship, casual care, and those tiny habits not worth mentioning. But Zhuo said that was a strength too. Later, we added each other on WeChat. Her profile picture was an orange cat sprawled across a keyboard. Her nickname was simple, Junior. "Track tomorrow morning at 6:40. Whoever is late buys soy milk." I replied, "Okay." From that day on, chance meetings became an appointment. We would run together. Sometimes she could not get up. At 6:30, she would send me a voice message. Her voice would be low and muffled, still thick with sleep. "Fang Yuan, I am not being a functioning human today. Go run by yourself." I would look at that voice message and fail to hold back a smile. Sometimes I stayed up late doing assignments the night before and was 10 minutes late in the morning. She would stand at the track entrance, arms crossed, watching me arrive late. "Soy milk," I said. "My treat." Her face immediately lit up. "I want the sweet kind. Too much sugar in the morning is not good for you." "Why do you sound exactly like my mom?" "Then, are you drinking it or not?" "I am." We started eating together. At first, it was cafeteria breakfast after our runs. Soy milk, steamed buns, eggs, and sometimes a bowl of hot congee. Later, it became lunch. She would message me, "Junior, second cafeteria changed its set meals. Are we going or not?" I had just come out of the library then, and I replied, "Let's go." Unlike by Ningbing, Zhuo rarely posted on WeChat moments. Her moments were visible for only the past 6 months. Even when I opened them, there were only a few scattered posts. Either she was complaining about lab class, or sharing her game results. Once I asked her, "You do not like posting on moments?" She was lowering her head to unwrap chopsticks. Without looking up, she said, "No time." "Busy, no." She handed me a pair of chopsticks. "Gaming." Seeing how confidently she said it, I suddenly felt at ease. By then, it had been a long time since I last looked through by Ningbing's moments. One evening, Jingxi's temperature dropped sharply. It had still been sunny during the day, but by dusk, the wind had picked up. Leaves were blown tumbling all over the ground. Zhuo insisted on dragging me off campus to try a new clay pot meal place. "Weather like this is made for hot food." She tugged her scarf up a little. When we came out after eating, the wind felt even colder. She hunched her neck, both hands shoved into her coat pockets. Yet she was still complaining. "The owner of that place is way too stingy. There was barely enough for 2 bites." I walked beside her, listening to her chatter on. When we reached the north gate of the university, a gust of wind suddenly swept over. Zhuo shivered from the cold. I stopped walking. She turned back to look at me. What is it? I took a step forward and pulled her into my arms. Zhuo clearly froze. I tightened my arms and wrapped all of her in my coat and body heat. The wind blew past behind us. I heard myself say very clearly, "Senior, be my girlfriend." The person in my arms went quiet for 2 seconds. Then she laughed. It was not surprise, nor was it panic. It was the kind with a little smugness in it, the smile of someone who had guessed it long ago. "I thought you would wait until next semester." I lowered my head to look at her. She lifted her face. Her eyes were curved with a smile, and the tip of her nose was still red. "You knew all along?" "Not that long." She reached out and poked my chest. "It was just that. Every time we ate, you picked out the cilantro I did not like. When we ran, you instinctively stayed on the outside. When you lost at games, you pretended not to care, just so I could win one round. So I figured you probably like me a little." I went quiet for a moment. She blinked. "What? Did I get it right?" I asked softly. Zhuo laughed even harder. She eased slightly out of my arms and held out her hand, palm up. "Then, boyfriend, take my hand and walk me back." Our fingers interlaced. We walked back into campus side by side. The streetlights stretched our shadows long. The wind was still blowing, but I no longer felt cold. In that moment, I suddenly understood. A secret crush can be agonizing, but liking someone does not have to hurt that much. After we got together, we were not especially showy about it. Zhuo was never the type to show off, and I was even less so. But we still posted one photo. It was only our shadows under a streetlight. It was that night after the temperature dropped. The wind had blown leaves all over the ground. In the photo, the shadows were stretched long by the streetlight. At the end of the shadows, 2 hands were clasped, fingers interlaced. There was no caption, no location tag, not even a hint of flirtation. Yet the more understated it was, the more obvious it became. After Zhuo posted it, someone soon commented underneath, "Hey, so you are no longer single? Is it that junior who asked you out before? You really landed yourself a younger guy. Bring back the grilled sausages, or this is not over. No wonder you stopped gaming with us and keep going to the library lately. Turns out you were dating." Zhuo replied to everyone at once, "Mind your own business." She followed it with the default smiling emoji. She turned and asked me, "What are they saying on your moments?" My roommates asked if my account was hacked. "They're thinking about helping me file an appeal." She laughed. At the same time, in Sushi, Ningbing was sitting on her dorm bed. She had just showered. Her hair was half dry. Her phone screen was lit. She had not been doing very well lately. When she first came to Sushi, everything had felt new. The plane tree roads were beautiful. The lake on campus was beautiful. GDA held her hand as they walked through the corridor beneath the teaching building. He told her where it was good to study, where photos came out best, and which milk tea shop was the most crowded. Back then, Ningbing truly felt as if she had stepped into a brand new world. She thought this was the wider world she had wanted. But university was not like high school. In high school, everyone was penned into the same classroom. Who liked whom? Who walked home with whom? Who explained problems to whom? All of it was compressed into a tiny space. Back then, GDA seemed always to be by her side. But once they reached university, life suddenly became too full. Club recruitment, student union interviews, school activities, welcome parties, lectures and competitions. Everyone seemed to be thrown into wider waters, beginning to find their own direction. GDA was the same. He joined the debate club, was pulled into projects by upperclassmen, and made a group of friends who really knew how to have fun. At first, Ningbing thought this was fine. She liked capable people. She also liked the way GDA seemed to shine in a crowd. But later, she slowly realized that people who shine are always surrounded by others, and she was no longer the only one listening to him speak. That night, she had wanted to ask GDA to see a movie. It was a newly released film. She had checked the show times in advance. 7:30 in the evening. The timing was perfect. She messaged GDA, "Do you want to see a movie tonight?" After the message went out, there was no immediate reply. Ningbing waited for a while. Then she waited a little longer. She thought maybe he was busy. So she went to the cafeteria and ate alone. Then she returned to the dorm and showered. She sat on her bed, scrolling through videos, until she fell asleep at midnight. She never got a reply. The next morning, she told Liu Ryan about it. Although Liu Ryan had gone to another city, The two of them still kept in touch. Bai Ningbing sent a voice message. Her voice carried a grievance she could not quite hold down. "Do you know what happened? I asked him to see a movie. In the middle of the night, he finally replied with one line. He said, 'I was just playing Overwatch with the guys. God, I only saw it when I woke up this morning.'" Liu Ryan quickly sent back a speechless emoji. Then she wrote, "That is way too much." Bai Ningbing sat on her dorm bed, clutching her phone. Suddenly, she did not know how to answer. It was not that GDA did not like her. When he passed a milk tea shop, he would bring her the fruit tea she liked. In front of his friends, he would openly hold her hand. When she was angry, he would coax her. He would say too much had been going on lately, and he had not been able to look after her. Every word sounded perfectly sweet, but Bai Ningbing still felt that something was different from high school. That feeling of being truly kept in someone's heart was growing rarer. She used to think love should be passionate, but passion, it seemed, could fade too. And it faded fast. That evening, while Bai Ningbing was scrolling through WeChat moments, she happened to see Fang Yuan's photo. Her finger froze. Bai Ningbing looked at the two shadows with their fingers interlaced. It was as if something gently struck her heart. It did not hurt, but it felt suffocating. She suddenly realized that she and Fang Yuan had not been in touch for a long time. Their chat window was still stopped somewhere far in the past. She tapped it open. There were only a few pictures of their new schools. Before that were their messages encouraging each other the night before the Gaokao. And before that, there were all those scattered little things from high school. Bai Ningbing scrolled upward, message by message. The more she scrolled, the more unsettled she felt, and the emptier the silence became. She had once been so used to Fang Yuan's presence that she had almost forgotten that if people do not reach out to each other, they really do slowly drift apart. She wanted to send Fang Yuan something. She wanted to ask if it was cold where he was today. She wanted to ask if the person in the photo was his girlfriend. She wanted to ask, "Have you been doing well lately?" But the input box stayed lit for a long time, and she could not type a single word. She did not know in what capacity she should ask an old classmate. As a friend, in the end, Bai Ningbing left the chat window and returned to WeChat moments. That photo was still there. No caption, only two shadows leaning close together. She looked at it for a long time. Then she liked the post. After that, she turned off her phone. The dorm lights had already gone out. Her roommates were chatting softly behind their bed curtains. Outside the window was Sushi's damp night wind. Bai Ningbing lay down. But in her mind, the small hometown from many years ago suddenly appeared. The old storage room at the station in summer, the blueberry-flavored ice pop, and a slender boy, always walking on the side closest to the road. She turned over. She pulled the blanket up to her chin. Only at that moment did she vaguely realize that some people do not stay in one place forever. He would move forward too. He would meet someone else too. And all that care and tenderness once meant only for her would be given to another bright person. Bai Ningbing got hurt during lab class. It was not really serious. When a glass instrument shattered, she instinctively reached out to steady it. The edge sliced a cut into her hand. Blood quickly seeped out. The girl in her group was startled. She immediately called the teacher. The lab teacher took one look and said the wound was not deep, but she had better go to the infirmary to have it treated. Bai Ningbing nodded. She pressed a tissue against her finger. When she walked out of the lab building, the weather was gloomy. Sushi was always like this after winter set in. The wind carried dampness. The chill was not obvious, but it seeped little by little into her bones. There were not many people in the infirmary. The school doctor cleaned her wound. When the disinfectant touched it, she drew in a soft breath from the sting. The school doctor said, "Hold still. Young lady, do not move your hand." Bai Ningbing murmured yes. She lowered her head and looked at her finger stained yellow with iodine. Suddenly, she badly wanted someone to talk to. So she took out her phone and messaged GDA, "I cut my hand in lab class. I am at the infirmary." After she sent it, she stared at the screen for a while. No reply. She thought he might be in class. After about 10 minutes, she sent another photo of her bandaged finger. "It is nothing serious. It just hurts a little." There was still no reply. The school doctor finished bandaging her hand and told her not to get it wet for the next 2 days and to change the dressing on time. Bai Ningbing sat on the bench outside the infirmary. She did not leave right away. She opened her chat with GDA, then backed out. She opened it again, then backed out again. Half an hour later, her roommate called her. "The teacher said you hurt your hand." Bai Ningbing froze for a second. "Wait for me at the infirmary. I will be there right away." Her roommate arrived quickly. She was a little breathless from running. She was still holding a cup of hot milk tea when she saw Bai Ningbing's gauze-wrapped hand. Her brows immediately furrowed. How did it get this bad? Does it hurt? Bai Ningbing shook her head. It is okay, really. Okay, your face has gone pale. Her roommate pushed the milk tea into her other hand. Come on, I will walk you back to the dorm. Have you had dinner? If not, I will order you some congee. Bai Ningbing lowered her head and looked at the milk tea in her hand. Warmth passed through the cup wall into her palm. Her nose suddenly stung with tears. It was not that she needed GDA to rush over at once. She knew college was not like high school. Everyone had their own classes. Everyone had their own schedule. She also knew GDA had been busy lately. But when a person is in pain, they cannot help becoming a little greedy. They want to be seen. They want someone to ask right away, does it hurt? That night, GDA still did not reply. Bai Ningbing washed up carefully, keeping the wound away from water. After she lay down in bed, she placed her phone beside her pillow. Every time the screen lit up, she would immediately pick it up and check. But it was never him. It was a class group message, a food delivery notification. It was a sticker from Liu Ryan. Until after 1 in the morning, when the dorm had gone completely quiet, GDA's chat window still showed no movement. Bai Ningbing turned her phone face down beside her pillow and closed her eyes. She was exhausted but slept lightly. At 10 the next morning, GDA finally replied, last night there was a club dinner. Everyone agreed not to check their phones. I did not notice. A few seconds later, he sent another message. Is your hand better? Bai Ningbing stared at those 2 lines for a long time. Suddenly, she felt so tired. She typed, deleted it, then typed again. In the end, she sent only 1 line. GDA, let's break up. The other side quickly showed a typing indicator. This time, he replied very fast. Why are you suddenly saying this? Is it because of last night? I am sorry. I really did not mean to ignore you. I truly have been too busy lately. Bai Ningbing, please do not do this. Can we meet and talk? Bai Ningbing watched those messages pop up one after another. But inside, there was none of the turmoil she had imagined. She replied, I understand you. I do not blame you. We are just truly not suited for each other. After sending that sentence, she put her phone on the desk. The sunlight in the dorm was faint, falling across her gauze-wrapped finger. She suddenly remembered one evening self-study session in high school. Her stomach hurt. She had only lain on the desk and frowned. Fang Yuan noticed right away. He asked if her stomach hurt, then got up to buy her bread and bring her warm water. Back then, she had already taken the medicine GDA handed her. So, she never noticed whether Fang Yuan came back afterward. She had never even seriously wondered why Fang Yuan could always notice at once when she felt unwell. Why, in the days before her period, he would place hot water at the corner of her desk. Why he always brought an extra umbrella when it rained. Why, every time they walked together, he stood on the side closest to the road. Before, she had taken all of it for granted, because Fang Yuan had always been that quiet and reliable, as if whenever she reached out, he would be there. Whenever she was sad, he would be there. Whenever she needed him, he would be there too. But only now, only then did she finally understand that the things she had grown used to taking for granted were not something the world owed her. That was Fang Yuan's complete acceptance. And for so many years, without a word, he had placed her in the most important position. Only back then, she had been too greedy. She thought love had to be intense and dramatic. She thought being shown a bigger world was what love meant. But she forgot that the rarest thing is not someone taking you to faraway places. It is someone knowing before you even open your mouth, whether you are cold, whether you hurt, and whether you want to go home. That afternoon, Bai Ningbing asked GDA to meet her by the campus lake. GDA looked a little tired and a little panicked. He said a lot. He said he really had neglected her lately. He said he thought things between them were stable enough. He said college had only just begun, and there was too much going on. He had not learned how to balance it all yet. He said he would definitely change from now on. Bai Ningbing listened quietly. The wind by the lake lifted her hair. She looked at GDA and suddenly realized he was only an 18 or 19-year-old boy too. He had not meant to neglect her. It was not that he did not care about her at all. There were simply too many things in his world. Clubs, friends, games, activities, and a new life. She had once been drawn to that freshness in him. But now she finally understood. That feeling was not hers alone. That wind had blown toward her, and it would blow toward others too. It had paused with her, but it would not stay forever. Bai Ningbing said softly, "Forget it." GDA looked at her. After a long while, he lowered his head. "I am sorry." Bai Ningbing shook her head. "It is okay." She truly did not blame him. It was just that some feelings had been mistaken from the very beginning. She had taken a racing heart for a place to belong, and intensity for something lasting. Coming to this day was only a final return to where it should have ended all along. That night, Bai Ningbing returned to the dorm and sent Liu Ryan a voice message. She was not crying, but her voice was very soft. "Liu Ryan, I think I lost him." Liu Ryan was silent for a long time. Of course she knew Bai Ningbing did not mean GDA. She also knew that the him Bai Ningbing meant was Fang Yuan. In the end, Liu Ryan did not ask, "You only know that now." Nor did she say, "I warned you long ago." She only sent a hug sticker, then replied with one line, "Ningbing, what can a hug really do? This was your own choice. You two truly are not going the same way anymore. That is all." Time seemed to start speeding up in Zhuo's senior year. Suddenly, everything moved faster. Before, we always felt college was long. We thought we could take our time running, take our time eating, waste an entire afternoon slowly in the library, and slowly wait for a movie to begin. But when Zhuo neared graduation, everything crowded in at once. Graduation thesis, internship certificate, thesis defense materials, campus recruitment interviews, renting an apartment, moving out of the dorm. Every day, she was so busy her feet barely touched the ground. Sometimes she left at 7 in the morning and did not come back until 11 at night. The messages she sent me on WeChat grew shorter. On the subway, the interview was exhausting today. My thesis formatting got sent back by my advisor again. "Fang Yuan, I want something hot." When I saw that last message, I had just come out of the library. It was winter. The wind was harsh enough to sting your face. I took a detour to the little shop by the school back gate and bought a clay pot meal, afraid it would be cold by the time she came back. So I sat in the shop and waited for her to arrive. When Zhuo arrived, the tip of her nose was red from the cold. She pushed the door open, saw me sitting in the corner, with the still steaming clay pot meal in front of me, and visibly froze for a moment. "You have been waiting here for me this whole time?" I handed her the chopsticks. "Yes, I was afraid it would get cold." She sat down and lowered her head to take a sip of soup. Steam brushed across her face. Her eyes suddenly went a little red. I asked, "Is it too spicy?" She shook her head, her voice hoarse. "No." After a while, she said softly, "Fang Yuan, you are really someone I could build a life with." I smiled. Is that supposed to be a compliment? Of course, she looked up at me. A top-tier compliment. I had never been a very intense person. I did not say beautiful words every day, or suddenly prepare grand surprises. What I could do always seemed to be those tiny things. When she stayed up late revising her thesis, I stayed beside her. I put the charger, warm water, and stomach medicine where she could reach them with one hand. When she was nervous about an interview, I looked up the route for her in advance and calculated the subway transfer times. On the day of her thesis defense, she forgot breakfast. I bought soy milk and steamed buns and waited for her outside the teaching building. When Zhuo came out, she was wearing a white shirt and a black skirt, with her thesis defense materials in her arms. Her eyes curved with her smile. She spotted me from far away and ran toward me. "Fang Yuan," I passed. I said, "I know." She asked, "How did you know?" I put a straw in the soy milk and handed it to her. "You were smiling when you came out." Zhuo took the soy milk and suddenly reached out to hug me. All around us, graduates came and went. Some were holding flowers. Some took photos in their graduation gowns. Some were crying. Some were laughing. She buried her face against my shoulder and whispered, "Then you have to know in the future too." "Know what?" "Know when I am happy and when I am not." I raised my hand and patted her back. On the day Zhuo graduated, the weather in Jingxi was beautiful. She wore her cap and gown and took photos with classmates at the school gate. I stood outside the crowd, holding her bag and water bottle. Her friends pushed her forward to stand with them. She turned back and called, "Fang Yuan, come take one with us." I said, "You all go ahead." She frowned. "Cut it out." Then she ran straight over, grabbed my wrist, and pulled me into the frame. The moment the shutter clicked, she tilted her head and smiled at me. In the photo, I wore a simple white t-shirt, standing among a group of graduates. I looked a little out of place. But later, Zhuo had that photo printed and put it in a frame. She said, "This is the most important photo from my graduation album." After graduation, Zhuo did not leave Jingxi. She found a fairly stable job, not far from the university. The salary was not especially high, but her co-workers were easy to get along with, and her boss did not make life difficult. She rented an apartment off campus. It was not big, a one-bedroom with a living room. The old residential compound had no elevator. The kitchen window let in a bit of wind. The bathroom light was unreliable too. But there was a breakfast stall downstairs, a fruit shop at the alley entrance, and the subway station was 10 minutes away on foot. The first time Zhuo took me to see the apartment, she stood in the middle of the living room, hands on her hips, as if inspecting her territory, and turned in a full circle. "What do you think?" I looked around. The walls were a little old, and the floor was scratched, but the sunlight was lovely. At 3 in the afternoon, light poured in through the window and fell across the empty floor, bright and very quiet. I said, "It is nice." Zhuo glanced at me. "You always say it is nice. It really is nice." She smiled. Later, I moved into. After the second semester of sophomore year, I began trying to write articles. At first, I only wrote book and film reviews for a few WeChat public accounts. Later, I gradually received steadier commissions. The pay was not much, but saved up, it covered a good part of my living expenses. Every month, I sent some money home. The first time I transferred money to my mom, she called me. Her voice was both happy and aching for me. "Do you have enough for yourself? Do not only think about sending money home." I said, "I do." She was silent for a while, then said, "Then do not wear yourself out." I gave a soft Before hanging up, she asked again, "Are things good with that girlfriend of yours?" I glanced toward the kitchen. Zhuo was standing at the stove, studying how to fry an egg. A slightly dangerous burnt smell drifted from the pan. I said, "Things are good." My mom smiled. "That is good." The day I moved in, I did not have much. One suitcase, one backpack, and a few books. Zhuo stood in the doorway, watching me hang my clothes in the wardrobe one by one. Then she suddenly sighed. "Fang Yuan, can you believe you are this low maintenance?" I said, "Isn't having fewer things better?" She nodded. "Save space for me." In truth, our days were nothing special. She went to work. I went to class. When I had no classes, I went to the library to write. At night, I came home and cooked. When work was busy, she worked overtime. After coming home, she would collapse on the sofa and call, "Fang Yuan, adult working life is beating me down way too hard." I would bring out the food I had warmed up. After a few bites, she would recover a little strength and start venting to me about all the messy nonsense at the office. Sometimes we argued too, over very small things, like her always tossing socks everywhere, or me staying up too late writing, like her yelling too loudly at teammates while gaming, or me not putting enough salt in the food. But after arguing, we made up quickly. Zhuo never gave me the silent treatment. When she was angry, she would say directly, "Fang Yuan, I am really annoyed right now." I asked, "Because of the socks?" She glared at me. "Because you clearly saw I was upset," and still pretended not to know. I was silent for 2 seconds, then said, "Then I know now." She laughed despite herself. Just like that, we filled that little apartment bit by bit. A pot of pot hose appeared by the window. Sticky notes appeared on the fridge. 2 pairs of slippers sat by the entrance. In the kitchen was the chili sauce she loved, and the cured sausages my mom mailed from home. On weekends when the weather was nice, we would go to the supermarket together. She pushed the cart. I was in charge of taking the puff snacks she casually tossed in, and putting half of them back. She protested, "Fang Yuan, you are seriously ruining my shopping experience." I said, "You still have not finished the chips from last time." Those were last time's chips. They are not the same as this time's chips. Looking at her righteous confidence, I still put 2 bags back in the cart. Stable days, somehow, pass even faster. So fast that when I looked back, I realized I was already a junior, and soon after, a senior. Zhuo went from complaining every day when she first started working, to handling a small project on her own. I went from revising a single article until dawn, to being able to take on assignments, with steady confidence. Sometimes, editors even praised me for having mature ideas. Sometimes, in dreams, I returned to the abandoned old station. When I woke and saw the present-day light outside the window, with Zhuo curled up on the other side, sleeping soundly, I would feel that those things really were long past. In the last spring before graduation, I was busy with my thesis, my internship, and my defense. Zhuo was even more nervous than I was. She took leave to attend my thesis defense and sat in the last row of the classroom. When I stood at the front giving my presentation, I saw her make a little cheering gesture at me. In that instant, I suddenly thought of many years ago, of the countdown on the back blackboard in my senior year classroom, and thought of the boy who had always felt he was only there as someone else's background. If the me from back then could see me now, he would probably breathe a sigh of relief. So, life really does move forward. So, having an unspoken love that ended quietly without ever coming to anything does not mean the rest of life is only regret. After the thesis defense ended, I walked out of the teaching building. Zhuo was waiting for me below the steps. She said, "Happy graduation." I looked at her and smiled. "I have not even gotten my diploma yet. Can I not say it early fine?" She opened her arms to me. I walked over and hugged her. That summer, I graduated from university. The present-day wind blew down the long campus road, holding Zhuo. I suddenly understood with perfect clarity that from leaving the small town at 18 to standing here at 22, the things I once thought I would never get past had all passed in the end, and I finally had my own direction. Before Spring Festival, I brought Zhuo back to my hometown. Actually, before we came, she had already video called my parents several times. My mom was nervous every time. She would clean the living room spotless in advance, prop her phone on the table, and sit perfectly upright, as if she were attending some formal meeting. Zhuo, though, was not nervous at all. On the first video call, she smiled and said, "Hello, Uncle. Hello, Annie. I am Zhuo." My mom froze for a moment, then immediately smiled so hard her eyes curved. On later calls, she could even chat through the screen with my mom about which fish stall at the market was freshest, and discuss with my dad whether Jingxi's winters were drier and colder than our hometowns. But when we actually reached my front door, I could still clearly feel my parents getting a little stiff. My mom had cleaned the house again and again since early morning. Fruit was set out on the coffee table. Even the sofa covers had been changed to freshly washed ones. My dad kept saying, "The girl is just coming over. Do not make such a big fuss." Then he went downstairs early that morning and bought the most expensive tea. He even quietly asked me whether she liked tea. I said she liked milk tea. My dad was silent for a few seconds, then said, "Then I will go buy some now." I could not help laughing. No need. When Zhuo came in, she was carrying a pile of things. A scarf from my mom, tea from my dad, and a box of pastries brought from Jingxi. My mom quickly said, "Oh, you came all this way. Why bring so many things?" Zhuo smiled brightly and handed over the scarf. "Annie, this is my first formal visit. I could not come empty-handed. If you do not accept it, I will be too embarrassed to come next time." My mom was completely charmed by her coaxing. In the end, she held the scarf and grinned from ear to ear. My dad sat beside us, holding his teacup, trying hard to maintain the composure of the head of the family. Zhuo turned to him. "Uncle, I do not really understand tea. I bought this after asking Fang Yuan's colleagues. If it does not taste good, next time just tell me the exact kind to buy." My dad immediately set down his teacup and said, "It is good, very good. That was thoughtful of you." Just like that, she settled naturally into my family's living room. It was clearly her first visit, yet she did not seem like a stranger at all. She took the initiative to go to the kitchen and help my mom pick vegetables. After my mom chased her out, she sat by the dining table and peeled garlic instead. My mom said, "Zhuo, leave that, do not bother." Zhuo did not even lift her head. "Annie, I do chores at home too. I am not that delicate." My mom glanced at me. There was a little satisfaction in her eyes, and also the secret smile of someone quietly relieved. That New Year's Eve dinner was very warm and lively. My dad even drank a rare small cup of liquor and talked more than usual. He started talking about my childhood. He said that once in 3rd grade, I did badly on a final exam. When I came home, I did not say a word. I shut myself in my room. My mom continued, "He has been like that since he was little. He keeps everything bottled up. Even when he is upset, he does not say it." Zhuo tilted her head and looked at me. She smiled. "He is still about the same now." My chopsticks paused over the food. "I talk plenty now." Zhuo nodded. Compared with me, you are still a bit behind." My mom laughed nonstop because of her. Later in the meal, my mom started talking about how old classmates and friends back home were doing. Who had gone to graduate school, who had moved away, who had gotten married, and whose baby was almost a month old. I had actually heard bits and pieces of all that before. The small town was too small. Many people's life paths circled around, and eventually made their way back to our parents' generation. At the dinner table, my mom said, "By Ningbing. You still remember her, right? That girl you often played with when you were little." I lowered my head and took a sip of soup. I remember. She came back after graduating from university. She passed the civil service exam. Now she works right here in our area. My mom said it casually. It is quite stable. I even ran into her at the market a while ago. Her mom said she is a little busy now, but being close to home feels secure. Zhuo was picking up some fish. Her movement paused slightly, but she did not look at me. She only removed the fish bones very naturally and placed the fish in my bowl. I gave a soft hum of acknowledgement. Being a civil servant is good. I said it calmly, and I truly did think it was good. After people grow up, it seems they all end up where they are meant to be. Some stay in the small town. Some go far away. Some circle around and come back. Some put down roots in another city. After dinner, I took Zhuo out for a walk. Spring festival night in the old district was lively. Downstairs, children ran around holding sparklers. In the distance, someone set off fireworks. When they burst open, the whole night sky lit up for an instant. Zhuo tucked her hand into the pocket of my coat. Her fingertips were icy cold inside. I held her hand. She looked up at those old apartment buildings and smiled. "So this is where you grew up?" "It is pretty good," she said, copying my tone. I turned my head to look at her. She immediately laughed. "What? Only you are allowed to say it is good. I am not allowed to say it." I laughed too. We walked on along the familiar road. The convenience store was still open. The freezer by the entrance glowed with white light. I glanced at it without thinking. On the lowest shelf, there were still blueberry-flavored ice pops. Zhuo followed my gaze. "Want one?" I shook my head. "No," she narrowed her eyes. "Every time you say you do not want something, your face looks like there is a story behind it." I did not answer. I only held her hand and kept walking. As we walked, we reached the abandoned old station at the northern edge of town. After all these years, it was even more worn down than I remembered. A few more panes of glass in the waiting hall had shattered. The yellowed old notice at the ticket window had already fallen halfway down. The route map on the wall had faded until the words were almost unreadable. The platform was still there. The tracks had rusted even worse. Weeds grew up through the cracks. The camphor tree at the end of the platform was still there too. Zhuo stopped walking. She turned to look at me. Fang Yuan gave a faint smile. His eyes were bright. "A secret." I looked at the tree too. The wind brushed through the camphor leaves with a soft rustle. After a long while, I said, "This used to be my secret hideout with someone." Zhuo did not interrupt me. She only pulled her hand out of my pocket and held my hand instead. Standing there on the old platform, I slowly told her about those things from long ago. I told her how, when I was little, I hid in the old storage room and cried. I told her how a little girl handed me half a blueberry-flavored ice pop and said eating something cold would stop the tears. I told her how we used to hide comics here and the summer homework we had not finished. I told her about the time capsule buried under the camphor tree and the 2 postcards placed inside it. I told her that he had once written that he wanted to go to Hideout with me, and I told her that I had written, wherever he went, I would go to. Zhuo listened quietly the whole time. This time, it felt as if our roles had reversed. In the past, it was always other people speaking while I listened to my Ningbing talk, about wanting to go somewhere far away, about the plane tree roads and sushi, about university life, about a fresh, new world. And I was used to standing beside her, keeping every emotion buried deep. Now I was the one speaking, and Zhuo was listening. She was not jealous, nor did she press me for painful details. She simply listened. She listened so seriously, just like what she once said about me, that I listened to people with real attention. It turned out she did too. When I finished, the station stayed quiet for a long time. In the distance, another firework went off. Zhuo gently swung my hand. "Then did you still want to go to Hideout after that?" I looked at that camphor tree and shook my head. I have not thought about it in a long time. "What about her?" I knew she meant by Ningbing. "We have not been in touch for a long time either." I said it, and she did not ask anything more. After a while, she suddenly said, "Fang Yuan, thank you for telling me all this." I looked at her. Zhuo stood in the dim light of the old platform. Her scarf covered half her face, leaving only her bright eyes visible. She said, "I am not trying to dig through your past. I just feel that. If this place matters to you, then I want to know the old you too. Somewhere inside me, I was suddenly moved. For all these years, I had always thought the old station was a place for farewells. A farewell to childhood. A farewell to unrequited love. A farewell to the version of myself who hid every feeling away. But, in that moment, I suddenly felt it could also be a place to begin again. I tightened my grip on Zhuo's hand. Come on, let us go home. Home. Zhuo smiled and followed my steps. Together, we left the old station. We walked past the rusted tracks, past the waiting hall with its broken glass, past that old route map, whose destinations could no longer be made out. On the way back, the light outside the convenience store was still on. Zhuo suddenly stopped. I want an ice pop. I looked at her. Eating an ice pop in winter? So what? She sounded completely justified. People have the freedom to eat ice in winter too. In the end, I still went into the store with her. Blueberry-flavored ice pop. Ice pop was snapped in half by her. She handed me one half. Here. I looked at that frozen half and suddenly smiled. What is it? She asked. Nothing. I took it. The blueberry flavor melted on my tongue. It was still icy cold, and it did not seem quite as sweet. But this time, I did not feel regret anymore, because the person beside me took one bite, wrinkled her nose, and said, "What is this taste? Why does it taste so much like cheap artificial flavoring?" I laughed out loud. Zhuo glared at me. "You are still laughing?" I said, "Fang Yuan, from now on, stop keeping everything to yourself." She slipped her other hand back into my palm. I am very good at listening. I held her hand. Got it. The night wind in the small town was cold. In the distance, fireworks rose one after another. I held Zhuo's hand and walked toward home. This time, I did not look back at the old station, because I knew the past had already stayed there, and what I held in my palm was the present. 8 years later, Zhuo and I were already married. Our child was 4 years old. Her name was Fang Yai. Zhuo chose the name. She said Yai sounded like a little seedling, the kind that would grow up healthy and strong. At the time, my dad held the household registration booklet and stared at it for ages. Then he nodded and said, "Good, simple, easy to write." Zhuo laughed beside him. "Are you praising the name, or praising how much time she will save writing it on exams?" My dad looked a little embarrassed by that. He lowered his head to drink tea, but the corners of his mouth never came down. All these years, we have gone back to the small town every spring festival. To be exact, the three of us go back. Me, Zhuo, and Fang Yai. The days in this life passed quickly. Zhuo's work became stable. She went from the newcomer who came home every day complaining that adult working life was beating her down, to someone who could lead a team and scold new hires, while still gaming after work like a seasoned office worker. I also started as an ordinary editor, and worked my way up to senior chief editor. Sometimes I was still revising manuscripts after midnight, looking at line after line of text on the screen. I would sometimes remember, many years ago, the version of myself who stayed up writing in that old apartment block. Maybe that is how it goes. You walk forward, step by step, and after walking for so long, when you look back, you realize you have already gone very far. I once thought about bringing my parents to Jingxi. The apartment had already been fixed up when our child was little. My mom did go to Jingxi to help look after her for a few years. She complained that Zhuo did not know how to make soup, that I only knew how to raise a child by reading parenting books aloud, and that Jingxi's winters were so dry they made her nose hurt. But every time Feng Yai hugged her and called her grandma, she smiled and forgot every complaint. Later, when Feng Yai started kindergarten, our family no longer needed her there all the time. So my mom went back to the small town, because my dad had refused to go from the very beginning. He would say that Jingxi was good, with more opportunities, and that young people like us should stay there. But every time I mentioned getting them a place closer to us, he would wave me off. No. Your mom had things to do there. What would I do if I went? I knew it was not that he disliked Jingxi. He simply liked the small town more. He liked going downstairs at 7 in the morning to buy tofu pudding. He liked playing chess with Uncle Wang from next door at the compound gate. He liked the noodle shop on the old street that had been open for over 20 years. He liked taking a slow walk along the river at dusk. Everyone here knew him. Some called him Old Fang. Some asked whether his son was coming back this year. Some said his granddaughter looked like Zhuo, with those beautiful eyes. Then he would say, dead serious, that she looked like a Fang family member too. When my mom heard that, She would undercut him from the side. How does she look like your Fang family? Is anyone in your family that good with words? Every time Zhuo heard it, she laughed until she could barely stop. When we came back for Spring Festival this year, a thin layer of snow had fallen over the small town. It was Fang Yai's first time seeing snow in my hometown. She was so excited she ran around downstairs for half an hour. Even when her gloves were soaked through, she refused to come upstairs. Zhuo stood at the entrance to the building. Her scarf covered half her face as she called out, "Hey, Fang Yai, if you do not come back now, your dad is going to turn into an ice sculpture." Fang Yai was on the ground, holding a handful of snow. Without even lifting her head, she said, "Daddy is not scared." I picked Fang Yai up. She immediately shoved both her icy little hands against my neck. I sucked in a sharp breath. Zhuo laughed beside us until her shoulders shook. That evening, after dinner, our family went out for our usual walk. The small town streets were still lively during Spring Festival. There was the smell of sugar-roasted chestnuts, roadside stalls selling festive lanterns, glowing balloons in children's hands, and the broken crackle of fireworks in the distance. Yai held Zhuo's hand, skipping as she walked. When we reached the street corner, we ran into Ningbing. She was wearing an off-white coat. Her hair was a little shorter than before. She looked much quieter than she had in high school. She was carrying a bag of fruit. It looked like she had just come back from the supermarket. When she saw us, she paused for a moment. Then she smiled. "You are back?" I asked with a nod. "Got here yesterday." Zhuo greeted her very naturally. Ningbing, long time no see. All these years, Ningbing had never married. My mom occasionally mentioned it at the dinner table, saying her job was quite stable now, but her family was getting anxious. I never asked much. Zhuo never pressed either. Zhuo and Ningbing got along well. They were close friends, but it was never awkward. Every New Year, if they met a few times, they could stand by the street and chat for a while. They talked about work, about new shops in the small town, about whose child had started elementary school, and about how this spring festival was colder than last year's. Ningbing crouched down and looked at Fang Yai. Her eyes curved gently. "Yai, you have grown taller again." Fang Yai remembered her and obediently called, "Annie Bai. Happy New Year." Ningbing took an orange from her bag and handed it to her. "Here." Fang Yai took it. Very seriously, she said, "Thank you, Annie." Ningbing reached out and gently touched her hat. Then she slipped her a red envelope too. "Do not tell your mom and dad. This is our little secret." She really liked Fang Yai. That much was obvious. Every time she saw her, she brought some little thing. Sometimes it was fruit. Sometimes it was a slim fairy tale book. Zhuo never minded. She would only smile and say, "Yai, Annie Bai is bringing you treats again." Then Fang Yai would hug the gift to her chest, her eyes shining with happiness. Ningbing looked at her. Her gaze was very gentle. In that gentleness, there was no intrusion and no burning longing. It was more like someone had finally learned to stand at the right distance and watch a life that no longer belonged to her. We stood by the street and chatted for a while. Zhuo asked if she still had to be on duty this year. Ningbing nodded. "Half a day on the third day of the new year. Rough. It is all right. I am used to it." Wind blew in from the street corner, carrying a little chill from the snow. Ningbing pulled her coat collar tighter. She glanced at me, then quickly looked away. "When are you going back to Jingxi?" she asked. "The 6th, then you can stay a few more days." The topic was ordinary, like any old classmates meeting again after many years. Fang Yai suddenly lifted the orange in her hand. "Dad, can I eat this when we get home?" I looked down and said, "Yes." Ningbing smiled. "Then I will head back first," Zhuo said. "Take care on the way." Ningbing nodded. Then she turned and walked toward another street. The streetlights after the snow were bright. The light stretched her figure into a long shadow. Slowly, she blended into the crowd of the small town's winter night. Fang Yai watched her walk away. Then she suddenly asked, "Dad, why is Annie Bai walking alone?" Before I could answer, Zhuo bent down first. She tugged Yai's scarf a little higher for her. "Because everyone has their own path." Fang Yai nodded as if she half understood. I glanced at Zhuo. She looked back at me. Her eyes were calm, even touched with a faint smile. We did not continue that topic. On the way home, Fang Yai got tired from walking. She insisted that I carry her. Zhuo walked beside me. She slipped her hand into my coat pocket. Her palm was still like it had been years ago, always a little cool in winter. I held her hand. She asked, "Do you want to visit the abandoned old station tomorrow?" I thought about it. Then I shook my head. "No, Let us not. Zhuo looked up at me. I smiled. There is nothing much to see. Of course that place is still there. Maybe the camphor tree is still there too. Maybe the time capsule is still buried under the tree. But it had been a long time since I had thought about digging it up to look inside. Some stories do not need to be confirmed again and again. They happened, they ended, and left their traces. That is enough. We walked into the old residential building. The hallway light was still slow to react. It only came on after we stamped our feet twice. The snow in the small town had stopped. In the distance, fireworks rose again. This year did not seem so different from all the years before. We came back from far away, and when the holiday ended, we would leave again. My parents stayed in the small town. Ningbing stayed in the small town too. Some people drift apart. Some only nod hello by the roadside once in a while. Life does not have that many endings that must be explained. More often, it simply moves quietly forward, leaving some things behind, and making room where other things used to be. Like the faded route map on the abandoned old station wall, many destinations could no longer be seen clearly. But there were always people still on the road. From my Ningbing's perspective, after GDA and I broke up, I cried, not in any dignified way. That day, it was raining at the dorm. The plane tree leaves outside the dorm building were beaten wet by the rain. My roommates had all gone to class. I sat alone on my bed, hugging my knees. The curtains were half drawn. The room was as dim as evening. Again and again, I opened Fang Yuan's WeChat chat window. The last message was that long ago I'm here. I had asked if he had arrived at school. He said, got here. So it turned out that more than 10 years of feeling could truly stop at 2 small words. I stared at those 2 words. I stared for a very, very long time. Then, suddenly, I started crying. It was not because of GDA. At least, not entirely because of him. I had only suddenly understood that I seemed to have lost someone very important. I did not disturb Fang Yuan. I did not message him to ask how he had been. Nor did I use the excuse of being an old classmate to test how things were between him and that girlfriend. I knew that would look terrible. More importantly, I had no right. Fang Yuan was not a mistake I could undo. Nor was he someone I could win back just because I regretted it. After that day of crying, I washed my face, cleaned up my desk, and began seriously thinking about what I should do with my life. I used to think faraway places should feel vivid and intense. Sushi, Haishi, Jingxi, any place away from the small town, seemed to stand for another kind of life. But after I truly arrived in Sushi, I finally realized I did not like it as much as I had imagined. Sushi was wonderful. The plane tree roads were beautiful. Rainy days had their own softness. The lake on campus would shimmer with a pale gold at dusk. But no matter how lovely it was, it did not belong to me. Walking along those beautiful streets, I often felt like a woman temporarily staying in someone else's city. The excitement was real. So was the strangeness. Later, one summer vacation, I went to Haishi alone. I did not tell anyone. I did not post it on WeChat moments either. I spent a long time on the road and arrived in Haishi. At dusk, the high-rises lit up floor by floor. Glass curtain walls reflected the setting sun. People on the streets walked quickly. Even the wind seemed to have a destination. Haishi was dazzling. At night, the riverfront was packed with people taking photos. I stood in the crowd and suddenly remembered the year we graduated from middle school. I had leaned beside the time capsule at the abandoned old station, carefully writing that I wanted to go to Haishi with Fang Yuan, because the sea was vast and summer was long. Back then, I truly believed Haishi would have a very, very long summer. I believed that as long as I wanted to go, Fang Yuan would go with me. Now I had really come, but I was the only one here. I walked along the river for a long time. The damp wind blew my hair against the side of my face. The distant lights were glittering and decadent, like another world, unfurling its grand curtain. But I knew very clearly that all that splendor was never meant to have much to do with me. I was not as excited as I had imagined, nor was I as regretful as I had imagined. I simply realized, with sudden calm, that the place I once thought I longed for was only this. The sea was vast, but summer was not that long after all. After graduating from university, I returned to the small town to prepare for the civil service exam. That period was dull. Every day, I read, drilled practice questions, memorized materials, and worked on the essay writing section. At first, my mother was afraid I would not be able to stand it. Every few days, she came into my room with fruit. Later, she realized I really could sit still and study. Instead, She was the one who had trouble getting used to it. Didn't you used to hate staying at home most? I kept my head down and worked on the questions. I smiled. People change. About my coming back to take the civil service exam. My parents were happy, though they never said it aloud. But I knew. They had always hoped I would stay close to them. The small town was not big. Life there was not exactly fresh or exciting, but it was steady. The roads were familiar. Even at 7 in the morning, the auntie downstairs selling tofu pudding could recognize whose daughter I was. The day I passed, my mother cooked a whole table of dishes. My father, unusually, drank 2 cups of liquor. He talked more than usual. He said, "Stability is good. For a girl, a little stability is good." If it had been before, I probably would have bristled. I would have thought that sounded too old-fashioned, too dull. But that day, I only nodded and said, It is pretty good." Later, I started working. The job was not easy, nor was it as leisurely as other people imagined. Documents, forms, meeting notices, and grassroots affairs piled up. I was often so busy I was still replying to WeChat messages after work. But somehow, I slowly got used to it. Every morning, I left home at the same time. I walked down the road I had taken so many times back in school. Life settled into an orderly rhythm. Like a little river, neither hurried nor slow. The year Liu Ryan got married, I was her bridesmaid. She stood in the hotel dressing room in her wedding gown. When she saw me coming, she immediately waved me over. "Come help me check this. Is my veil crooked?" I walked over and straightened her veil for her. In the mirror, Liu Ryan looked beautiful. Her eyes were bright, and her face held a happiness that felt utterly real. She glanced at me, then suddenly asked softly, "What about you? Is there anything going on lately?" I shook my head. "No. Your parents are not pushing you." "Then, what do you tell them?" I smiled and said, "Work is busy." Liu Ryan fell silent for a moment. Of course she knew that was only an excuse. My family really had started pushing me. At meals, my mother would casually mention some family's son who seemed nice, where he worked, and how good his personality was. At family gatherings, someone would always say, "Ningbing has such good prospects. Why has she not found someone yet?" Every time, I just smiled and brushed it off vaguely. It was not that no one pursued me. People at work had introduced me to others too. The men were decent on paper, and their personalities were fine, but I could never make myself care. I was not keeping myself for anyone, nor did I think that in this lifetime, I had to wait for someone impossible. It was just that after that, I never met anyone again who made me want to spend my whole life with him. Many years later, I still thought of Fang Yuan. Sometimes it did not hurt much. Most of the time, he was like an old intersection in the small town. I would not deliberately pass by it, but once I found myself there, I would remember the past. I would remember how he always walked on the side closest to the road. I would remember the warm water he handed me. I would remember him lowering his head to explain problems to me, his pen moving so steadily across the scratch paper. I would remember him standing under the camphor tree at the abandoned old station, saying yes to me. One evening, I got off work early. Somehow, I walked to the north side of town. It was as if my feet had their own memory. By the time I came back to myself, the abandoned old station was already before my eyes. It looked even older than I remembered. The glass in the waiting hall was more badly shattered. The yellowed old notice by the ticket window had only half of it left. The route map on the wall was almost unreadable. I crossed the waiting hall and walked to the end of the platform. The camphor tree was still there. Its trunk had grown much thicker. Its branches and leaves spread wide, and in the sunset, they pressed a broad shadow over the ground. I stood beneath the tree for a long time. At last, I crouched down and reached out to dig at that patch of earth. The soil was a little hard. I found a tree branch and dug little by little. I dug until my fingers were covered in dust. Finally, I touched a familiar iron box. The time capsule had rusted even worse. I took it out, blew the dirt from it, and slowly opened it. Inside was a postcard. It was Fang Yuan's. I thought he had taken it away long ago, but it was still inside. There was only one sentence on that postcard. "Wherever she goes, I will go too." I stared at that line, and my eyes suddenly stung fiercely. When had he put it back? I could more or less guess. It must have been after the Gaokao. That day, GDA and I had embraced in the classroom. Later, after filling out our college application preferences, I came here with Fang Yuan. He was very calm that day. Calmly, he told me he had applied to Jingxi. Calmly, he asked if I was going to sushi. Calmly, he walked me to the alley entrance. And he listened as I said, "Starting today, we are not going the same way anymore." So, his calm had not been because he did not care. It was because he had already come here and buried that past with his own hands. I simply closed the box and buried it again beneath the camphor tree. The soil covered it little by little, the way Fang Yuan had covered over his own youth many years ago. Now, I finally buried my own small obsession in there too. On the way home, the sunset hung low. The alleys of the old city were stained orange. The shadows of utility poles slanted across the ground. When I reached that familiar alley entrance, I suddenly stopped. In that instant, I seemed to see us from many years ago. 18-year-old me stood at the alley entrance, carrying a school bag, my skirt hem lifted slightly by the evening wind. 18-year-old Fang Yuan stood in front of me, slim and quiet. There was something in his eyes I could not understand then. That girl smiled and said to him, "Starting today, we are not going the same way anymore." Back then, she thought it was only a light-hearted joke. She thought that tomorrow, the day after, even many years later, as long as he turned back, Fang Yuan would still be standing there. But he did not. He really did take another path. He went to Jingxi, got a girlfriend, and became an editor. And I had my own road too. A job at the local office back in town. My parents, and the ordinary rhythm of the seasons. We had each kept walking our own paths for a long time. That was good. At least he was doing well. At least that once silent and gentle boy was finally loved well by someone bright. The sunset fell across the alley entrance. I stood there and smiled very softly. We really are not going the same way anymore.